The Pakistani Taliban says it killed the federal minister for minorities in Islamabad. Shahbaz Bhatti was shot as he left his home in the capital for work. He had been calling for reforms to the country's controversial blasphemy law. The microfinancier Mohammed Yunus says he will fight the decision to sack him as head of the Grameen Bank. He was fired by Bangladesh's central bank on Wednesday. It says he violated the country's retirement laws. Nobel laureate Yunus denies the accusation and says he's seeking legal advice. At least 2 people have been killed in Yemen during clashes between security forces and protesters calling for reform. Thousands have also been demonstrating once again in the capital Sana'a and the northern city of Sada. Opposition parties have presented the president with a set of proposals they say form a roadmap to departure. President Saleh is said to be considering the plan. The Sudanese government has said it will hold a referendum on Darfur. Speaking here in Doha, the presidential advisor says preparations are underway.
We will start arrangements for this referendum. It's a referendum on the administrative status according to the Abuja Agreement. And this means we will start procedures that deal with this requirement in a democratic way for those residing in Darfur to decide on this issue. We expect it will take a few weeks because we need a law on how to hold this referendum. Of course, this is stipulated in the Abuja Agreement, which we adhere to, and it's not something new.
Rebels have killed at least 40 South Sudanese army soldiers in clashes, officials say. The Sudan People's Liberation Army were fighting militia led by renegade General George Attor. The army says Attor's forces attacked a key oil installation in the Jonglei region on Sunday. Southern Sudan voted for independence in a January referendum, but there's been ongoing tension in some areas. Zimbabwe's president has lashed out against the West over sanctions imposed on him. Addressing party members, Robert Mugabe threatened to take over foreign firms in retaliation. He also called for a boycott of overseas goods. The European Union and the United States had earlier imposed a travel ban on Mugabe and his supporters over suspected human rights abuses. Security in Côte d'Ivoire is deteriorating as fighting continues between President Laurent Gbagbo's forces and supporters of his rival Alassane Ouattara. Thousands of people have been trying to flee the violence. The UN says conditions are dire, with supplies of food, water, gas and petrol running low. International radio broadcasts are also being jammed. Imran Khan reports now on how some Ivorians have found refuge in one of Abidjan's churches.
Finally, a chance to smile and to sing for some. This is St. Ambroise Church, Abidjan. But instead of spiritual healing, it's medical healing in this makeshift refugee camp. Thousands have fled the fighting between supporters of the man the West recognizes as Côte d'Ivoire's leader, Alassane Ouattara, and Laurent Gbagbo, who is clinging to power despite international condemnation. They arrive here disheveled, tired, and in desperate need of care.
We have 2 types of people, those who only stay for a day and those that stay longer. We try and help them move to safer places.
And with homelessness comes the threat of disease. The International Red Cross fears that the longer this goes on, the higher the chance of disease spreading.
The most urgent needs that we are talking about are linked to health. The need for medicines is also linked to hygiene, which is also linked to the need for shelter.
Most of the fighting, which some fear could spread to civil war, has been in the Ouattara stronghold of Ababo. The sound of constant gunfire and fighting is now a distant memory for the ones that have made it here. For these men and women of God, helping the few that they can is all they can do.
We tell them they can always use this area for their children. We can't abandon them. That's why we come here, so we can protect them and their children.
The refugees here escaped with only what they could carry, and they've got no idea when they can go back or what they will go back to. Imran Khan, AlJazeera.
Libya's uprising continues to impact global oil prices. A leading expert tells us about the knock-on effect on the aviation industry. That's coming up. Plus,
and I'm Nazanin Mashiri in Tunis, reporting on the political crisis that's gripping this country.
On the next Rizkan show, world-renowned feminist Eve Ensler explains her latest project to empower the numerous victims of sexual violence in the Democratic Republic of Congo.
Rizkan, at this time on Al Jazeera.
Leaders are remembered, be they loved or feared. Alone they are inscribed on the pages of history. But what of the men and women whose hands build their monuments and whose blood stains their battlefields? The people who, against all odds, wield the power to reshape history. People in Power, at this time on AlJazeera.
From local traders to international finance, it's commerce that makes the world go round. For global companies and developing markets, communication is the currency, and information is the most valuable commodity. Counting the cost at this time on AlJazeera.
Welcome back. The top stories in AlJazeera. 2 US airmen are killed and another 2 servicemen injured after a man armed with a handgun attacked a bus carrying the troops at Frankfurt Airport. Police have arrested a 21-year-old from Kosovo. The US Army has filed an additional 22 counts against Bradley Manning. The soldier already faces 12 charges in connection with providing thousands of classified government documents to the WikiLeaks website. And there's been heavy fighting in the Libyan town of Brega. The area was attacked by pro-Gaddafi forces in a major counter-offensive to take back lost territory. But Gaddafi's troops were apparently unable to take control of the oil port. Now, oil prices have risen sharply in the wake of the unrest in Libya. Peter Goltz is an aviation expert and a former managing director at the National Transport and Safety Board in the United States. He joins us from Washington, D.C. Thanks for your time. Crude is now trading around $120 a barrel, and the price is volatile as the crisis in Libya escalates. But here's an interesting figure. According to Reuters, Europe processes the bulk of its aviation fuel with crude from Libya, up to 85%. Now, besides the wisdom of getting most of your aviation fuel from one source, what is this going to do to the aviation industry in the short term?
Well, it puts them under tremendous pressure. You know, the world's air carriers are just starting to recover from the downturn. The past year has been profitable for most of them. The recent spike in oil prices has put $3 billion in extra expenses. So the threat of a continued spike in the price of oil is very threatening to their profitability.
Okay, let's try and put this into some kind of perspective. Every time oil goes up $1, what does that cost the airline industry?
Well, for an average-sized airline, $1 million in profit.
So that's every time the price of oil goes up by $1. So what are we looking at this year, for instance, financially for the airline industry?
Well, in December of last year, they were projecting a price for the year of approximately $84 a barrel. Now the projection is $96 a barrel.